Welcome everybody to How to Thrive in 2025. Thanks for joining us for a look at how to set up your club for success. This is a foundational topic. Get the setup of your club right and you'll have all the elements in place to ensure that you thrive in 25 and well into the future. But before we get into all the tips and hints, I would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, wherever we are across Australia, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm Mark Campbell, one of the co-founders of CLUBMAP, and we're fortunate that sitting alongside me, virtually at least, I'm not sure where he is on your screen, is another CLUBMAP co-founder, our CEO, and the driving force of the CLUBMAP approach, and that's Terry Dillon. Terry's uniquely qualified to guide us through tonight's topic. Along with spending a couple of decades as an AFL executive at Hawthorn, Collingwood and St Kilda footy clubs, he's also spent a lifetime at the Coralline Football Netball Club in West Gippsland, where he's not only played 300 games, but has spent many, many years guiding the Cobras as a senior committee member. Also, before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge two of our fantastic partners, the Australian Sports Foundation and Active Queenslanders Industry Alliance. And of course, I would like to draw attention to our Telstra Best of Business Award for building communities, which we're very proud of. We're heading into our 10th year now, and over that time, we've been able to form a unique view of the sporting landscape at all levels, but especially when it comes to the community club environment right across the country. We spent a lot of time refining and distilling what are really elite practices so that they're suitable for use by community groups and sports, and especially grassroots organisations across 70 plus sports and activities, more than 100 governing bodies and councils, over 3,500 clubs, and way more than 20,000 volunteer administrators. That's the background. Now I'd like to get down to the meat and potatoes, and I'd like to pass the active window over to the person who knows more about this topic than just about anyone, our CEO and grassroots guru, Terry Dillon. TD?
G'day, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to what is our 13th series. And this is our 121st webinar that we've delivered over the last 5 years. Hopefully, each time we register for our webinars, we can give a few gold nuggets. I think we've got about 2/3 of attendees that are first-timers tonight. We will be running these fortnightly all year round. And we challenge the status quo on how community sport needs to be run structurally, revenue-wise, and also just tips on how you need to run your organisation. Technology, it really is having a significant impact on our community, but many of our community clubs haven't quite connected that as yet. But it's about working smarter and not harder. And tonight we're specifically focusing on structure, whether it's board structure or committee structure. For the sake of using one term, I'm going to use the term committee structure for the rest of the session. This is the key. And we do 250 workshops a year. We can give you great ideas on how to grow your club in terms of membership and sponsorship and have better systems. But the key to running a community organisation is getting the structure right. And we're hopefully going to put a little bit of a twist on how what that looks like. I just want to paint, we do spend 3 or 4 minutes promoting our services in the latter part of the webinar, because there are some clubs out there that want direct help, but many often don't know where to go for help. So tonight's topic, we're going to start with part 1 being thriving. How do you make it a thriving structure? Part 2 said, what is the right structure? And it's a bit of horses for courses. I'm going to give you different models that you potentially could look at. Mark's going to touch on part 3 in terms of empowering leaders and having the right structure to do that. And part 4, we're going to bring up some grants around the country at different states that you may or may not be aware of. And then we'll finish off with Q&A. So obviously the structure is the key piece of the puzzle. And it's all about, for us, it's about sustainability. And just to be clear on the role that we play, we do everything off field, off pitch, off court. That is our wheelhouse. And basically we're about building capability, because some of our sports like pickleball are really, really growing, and the capability and the number of people trying to run these growth areas, it really becomes challenging. So we're going to be talking about, okay, what does a thriving organisation look like? You want to get more volunteers, and we're going to talk about that tonight on how to touch up briefly on that. Obviously, the more volunteers, the more helpers. That helps you drive participation. And we will teach you in this webinar series on how to raise revenue. Because a lot of our clubs, the way they raise revenue hasn't changed for 50 years. And ultimately, we're talking tonight with community clubs, but also dealing with leagues and associations. But the lifeblood of community clubs is membership. And not just people that are participating, but people that have come and gone through the club. And obviously the roadmap is a key. And we find a lot of our clubs, 8 out of 10 clubs don't have a roadmap. They keep doing the same thing year in, year out, and they basically have no plan. And the fact that you're tuning in tonight is a really positive sign, because a lot of our clubs often know something's not quite right, but it's hard to fix it if you don't know what's broken. So we're going to be, again, we often say to a lot of the groups that we work with, that we do the one-on-one sessions with, until you get the structure sorted, everything is hard. A lot of our clubs are using a particular structure we're going to show in a second, but this is the key. A lot of our clubs often don't spend enough time getting the structure right. So again, we're going to talk about what is committee structure, what does it look like, and why is it important? So a lot of our clubs have this sort of model that's in front of you now. They'll have a president, they'll have a secretary, they'll have a treasurer, they'll have a VP, and then have a general committee. You know, the philosophy of volunteering in the current generation is changing. In the past, it was less people doing more. In the future, from now on, it is more people doing less. That is the model moving forward. So this is again, a good share of our clubs adopt this model. So I'm going to bring up a poll, and then I'm going to ask everyone a couple of quick questions. So just bear with me. So just confirm, have thumbs up if the polls come up. Yep. So the first poll is, does the committee structure that we've just shown you reflect how your club organisation sets up? The second question is, where are we here? How would you describe the volunteer situation at your club? Is it going really well? We do okay, we're really struggling. Some people might be unsure. And then the third question is, particularly for the newcomers, it's really good for us to see who are newbies and those that are tuning in tonight. So whilst that's populating, I'll keep steering through. So this stat's a really important one. A lot of community organisations are run by 3 or 4 people who do 90% of the work. That's the challenge. And a lot of those 3 or 4, a lot of people see how hard the 3 or 4 are working, and they go, gee, I've got to be careful here. If I get too close, I could get sucked into the big black hole, and then all of a sudden it becomes a real challenge. And I often talk about clubs, people, volunteers juggling family, club and work. Very rarely do I see anyone get 3 right at the one time. There's usually something that suffers. So I'm going to, while we're going through that, I might actually just play the poll results, and I'll bring those up. Thumbs up if these results have come up. Does that come up? Okay. Does the committee structure show and reflect how your club is set up? 61% said us. Somewhat, we have a few more roles. So if you had the top 2, which is basically saying, look, 86% of the people tuning in tonight are basically saying that model that we just showed a few minutes ago, that is the model that most clubs are overseeing. How would you describe the volunteer situation at your club? Going really well. One person said, yes, we got plenty of volunteers. So that says it all. We do okay, we could always do more. 53% really struggling. So if you add, look, I take that as 98% of clubs need more help. There was one of 51 who did the poll who basically said, look, we're going really well, which is, good on them. Fantastic. How many, and obviously you can see we've got 47% first timers, and there's a few loyal ones here as well, which is terrific. So we're going to, I think it's really important to go through those stats, and we'll now go to Mark who can talk to this.
Yeah, thanks very much, TD. It's not surprising, those results, really, is it? Because too much is being done by too few. I mean, unfortunately, that's just the fact of the matter. We've all seen it. The pressure builds up. People get pulled in too many directions at once, wearing all sorts of different hats, and something's got to give. They burn out. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in a situation where there's a vacancy on the board or in the committee room. And if you're not careful, it's a revolving door. And the people looking on, well, they get a bit wary. they're even less likely to put their hands up to help. And the last thing you want, or the last thing they want, is to be on a committee. They don't want to be a board member and end up burning out like so many before them. But the good news is that you don't have to be on the committee to help your club. We've come up with what really is, well, we believe, and the data proves that it is a revolutionary way to share the load, to prevent people from burning out due to overwork and bringing back the enjoyment that comes from actually being a part of the club. And the good news is that Terry's going to take us through how we can make that happen. Take us through that, TD.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Look, there's no exact science here. It's a bit of horses for courses. It can vary from a small, medium to a larger size club. And we're going to go through various models that potentially, or particularly one particular model that's a generic model. It's more set for a medium-sized club. But I mentioned earlier in my sort of prelude about the importance of the committee spending enough time getting this sorted, not that old-fashioned structure that 90% said they were adopting. Again, if I had to give one tip tonight and forget about everything around Mark and I will say, in the next 40 minutes, see that word visual? I wish I could blow that up 10 times. 95% of our clubs do not have a visual structure. People want to know what they're walking into. People often see those 3 or 4 people doing all the work. And that's why we promote a different model. And again, promote your structure. For some reason, 90% of our clubs do not promote their structure. And we're going to talk about, we promote a 3-tier model. And we're going to have, and again, it's not for everyone, but, you know, I think it's a really good model that, and a lot of our community clubs, sometimes the politics can get into way and the committees are so big that it's hard to actually make a decision, right? And they're paralysed by bureaucracy sometimes to an extent. So we promote a 3-tiered structure. The executive committee, the decision makers. You know, I know with my local club, we have a dozen on the committee and there's 5 decision makers. We can't, and again, it's real, and that's efficiency and effectiveness of making decisions. And again, the second level is people who sit on a committee who have a role. I'm a big believer, if you're on a committee, you have a role. If you don't have a specific role, I do not think you need to be on that committee, personally. Easy for me to say that, but I think it's really important that everyone has that a structure and displaying it accordingly. We sort of touched on a couple of times in the last 10 minutes. You don't need to be on the committee to help. This is the greatest missed opportunity. There's a lot of committees that we deal with, they're virtually closed shops. Only the committee can make decisions. We do find with a lot of the sports we work with, a lot of our committees are 45 years and over. A lot of the 45 years and under are raising families, putting food on the table, trying to pay off a mortgage, and they're juggling life. And again, I'm not saying the older ones aren't, but this is, you know, probably the busiest time in their lives. But I suppose the point I'm trying to lead into, you do not need to be on the committee to help. There might be a lot of good qualified people who said, I think I can do that, but I don't need to be on. I don't want to go to a committee meeting on Tuesday or Thursday and so forth. So that's the model that we promote. We're going to bring up a live example. When I say live example, it's a good tried true model. It's now about 12 to 15 months old. This is, again, this is the visual structure that we were showing you earlier, and it's just a generic model. This is more for a medium-sized club, blue being the decision maker. The black boxes are more about people who sit on a committee who have a role, and the green boxes are people who don't necessarily need to be on a committee. Again, that can be chopped and changed, but it's the philosophy we're trying to press here. And again, we do find a lot of our clubs are very lean down the middle. They literally have this, and we often find a lot of the clubs, the executive are wearing the blue hats, the black hats, and the green hats at the same time. And a lot of clubs say, TD, it's great to have this, or Mark, or whoever. It's great to have that model, but guess what? We don't have the people to fill them. It's great in theory, isn't it? So the next session we're going to talk about in 2 sessions on is about volunteers, how to grow your volunteer base. I'm only going to mention this now because it'll raise more questions than answers. But a lot of our clubs are not tapping into the over 55s funding, 30 hours a fortnight, 17 grand per person, plural persons. And again, that could be someone running your canteen. It could be someone writing grants. It could be someone writing sponsorship. Again, that could be a lot of those green boxes that aren't filled that people who potentially can help the club. So in the 2 webinars from now, which is 4 weeks tonight, we're going to touch on and really dive into a bit more detail on that. So this is a club that we work with. I'm going to play the video first and I'll come back to the structure. So this is a club that were just voted the Northeast State Club of the Year after us. We've been working with them a couple of years. But this was a club that had 5 or 6 people doing everything. And I played this last year and I'm really keen to play it again because I think it's a great story about they didn't think the people were there. They didn't think the people were there, and I'll play it now. So thumbs up if you can hear this.
We're certainly very excited about where this opportunity is going to take our club. Definitely off the back of our involvement with CLUBMAP and with the workshop that we did a few months ago. So we can't take all the credit for what's happened in the last few weeks, but we had about 5 or 6 people who were literally running the club for the last 4 or 5 years. And it was getting to a point where it was just unsustainable. You know, it was all leading in a very, very downward spiral for our club. So we just needed to recognise how can we start, and we just knew that we needed more people involved to take the load, share the load, as we're always saying. And, you know, we're fortunate that over the last 6 or 8 weeks, as you said, we've gone from about 6 people to 30 on the committee. So it's fabulous. It all tied in beautifully, connecting with CLUBMAP, doing the first club workshop. And, you know, at the end, we presented our new club management structure. It certainly wasn't the problem for other tennis clubs, but ours takes a lot of people to run it.
Can everyone hear me out? Could you hear that okay? And Mark, I've got a message from you. Yeah, okay. So this is the model they ended up adopting, and I'm just using this as a live example. They're quite a big tennis club, but the principles are there. Blue being the decision makers. The blue box people who sit on a committee who have a specific role. The green box are people who want to contribute, who don't necessarily need to be on the committee. And again, a perfect example, a lot of our clubs, they're really lean down here. Often the secretary, the treasurer, the president are trying to write grants, as an example, right? And, you know, they don't have really any, the president or the treasurer is trying to sell sponsorship. So it all comes back to structure. We're going to give you in this whole series new ways of raising money that will blow your mind. And I want to get this message out to every single club around Australia, because the way clubs raise money hasn't changed in 50 years, but you can't execute the initiatives that are going to come in the next 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 weeks until you get this right. Because 3 or 4 people can only do so much. And typically it's a real challenge. So that's sort of an important piece of the puzzle. Again, if you're going to do this, it's really important, again, emphasising the visual structure. So people want to know what they're walking into. Again, ideally, you should have a position description against either of these. Ideally, the perfect scenario is this. And again, you really need to identify who your asker is. Once you agree on a structure, the committee or the board, who is going to do the asking? That can be multiple people, but there's a real skill in asking, a real skill. And again, it's got to be the glass half full glass that's, you know, very positive person, well liked, well respected, knows the club, well regarded. Some clubs might have a person that maybe doesn't meet those characteristics and can potentially put people off. So that's not your asker. There's a real skill in doing the asking. So again, list your jobs, apply the 3 levels, build out the chart, make it a visual chart, start to pencil in some names and prioritize the gaps. So again, the structure often is the key. You know, I might just go back a fraction here. We call it see this outside of the president, this role here is nearly the most important role at the club, right here. They went from 6 to 30 people in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Not 6 months. I'm not going to, I love Kim, and Kim, she's been a great support. I don't necessarily like 30 people on the committee, but I'm not going to knock it. If this is what they've done, well, if you had the blue boxes and the red and the black boxes, you probably got about 20. That's a lot. That's a lot on any committee, isn't it? But the good thing is they've got the blue that are decision makers. If, again, the biggest takeout for everyone is here tonight, if you're a club that has a big committee or and everyone has their 2 bobs worth, and you're trying to have 15, 20 people all making decisions on every part of running the club, it is a real challenge. It's a real challenge. And then again, we're going to talk about the next 2 webinars on how we grow this structure to populate. So we're now going to move on to the third section, how structure empowers leadership. I'll go over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, DD. This is a bit of a change of pace, really, because we're talking about clubs, and we're talking about how clubs are structured, but clubs are people, okay? And clubs have to be led by people. It's people leading other people. So this webinar is really about structure and how it creates efficiencies and effectiveness and ultimately success in your club. Structure can also contribute to your personal power as a leader of the club, because a good structure creates more time for club leaders, and that can be time to listen, okay? And listening is incredibly powerful. It's a leadership superpower. Good leaders are good listeners. And it makes sense because we've got 2 of these and 1 of these, and we really should be using them in that ratio. But I guess you're questioning that and saying, well, why is listening important? Isn't leadership all about telling people to do what to do? No, it's not. It's actually in the names, leadership. It's about getting people to follow you. And to do that, you have to listen to them. I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm a member of my local police and citizens youth club. And I've known a young bloke down there named Jason, well, for quite a few years now. I've known his dad, John, even longer. Now, this story comes from a couple of years back. Jason was having trouble with relationships. He was 22 or 23 and looking for more than just, you know, Friday night fun, but he couldn't seem to connect with any of the women he was interested in. It just wasn't happening for him. So I took him aside and I said, look, mate, here's some homework for you. Next time you meet someone you think has potential as a long-term partner, after you've said your g'days, know each other's name, all that stuff, the only thing you're allowed to say for the next 30 minutes is to ask one of these 2 questions. First, and then what happened? And the other one is, and how did that make you feel? That's it, for half an hour. Now, Jason was very sceptical about this, to put it mildly, but I said to you, look, it's up to you, mate. What you're doing clearly isn't working, so you've got to try something new. Anyway, I saw him, I don't know, 3 weeks later, and he just dropped to the floor, Wayne's World style. I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. Clearly, he'd taken my advice and it had worked. He connected with someone by following the formula, and I haven't actually seen him for quite a while now, but the last time I saw his old man, which was about 3 or 4 months ago, he told me they're still together because Jason gave himself the opportunity to listen and connect. And it's a really good example of how active listening empowers the other person, because in conversation, too many of us are simply waiting for the other person to stop speaking so we can start and say what we want to say. A better approach is to actually let the other person tell us what's on their mind, okay? It's really important to let them say it, whatever it is, let them express that, get it out of their system. Then when they're ready, you can have a proper 2-way conversation about whatever it is you want to bring to the table. And the bottom line, listen more and you'll learn more about the things that matter, not only to you and your club, but to the people in it. And you'll empower those people because their voices will be heard, not just heard, but listened to. And an almost magical outcome of this is that you'll find it easier to enlist them to join in and help, to become one of the people who make up your club's structure. Most likely that's not going to be on the board or committee, but perhaps to perform a particular task with a particular skill that they possess, in those green boxes down the bottom. And they'll be happy to help. And that way, everybody wins. Your club gets stronger and more powerful, and the people involved, they get a lot more enjoyment. So it is all about structure. Structure creates space for you to listen, and listening encourages people to get involved. So that's it. Thanks, everyone. But do give that a go.
Sorry, Mark.
What's that, TD?
I can ratify what Mark just said. I'm involved with the club for all my life. Our president's just stood down after 21 years. He's the ultimate listener. And that's why he was there for 21 years, because people had their say. And he's a great mediator, a very calming influence. And that chair role, that personality of the chair is so, so important. You can't have an emotive executive, because it just becomes, really challenging. We're going to touch. We're going to bring up some grants and just everyone a bit of an update. We're going to finish with particularly the newbies here. And we've got a good share of newbies here. We'd really encourage you to do a health check. So if you want to opt in, there's a box at the end that you can tick. But as a starting point, a lot of our clubs don't know what's wrong. But the health check will sort of identify it. So here's a national pies. That's an interesting one. So it's $1,000. So that's a national grant for if you go to National Pies. That's open now. Just little grants. National Viera community groups. It's open year. There's a lot of state grants we obviously know about. This is by Terra Community Grants, 1 year round, no limit, most projects between 1,000 and 10,000. Clubs New South Wales, I think have got to be careful, but I think they have one of the best state grant systems in Australia, because they have a central point where everyone goes. It's called Clubs New South Wales Grants Program. And the great thing about it then feeds it out to the various organisations, and it's geographical based about who can qualify and who can't qualify. Tasmanian Community Fund, that's open all year round, 5 to 50K. Queensland Gambling has been Michael's been involved in that, and I know a lot of our clubs have, but a lot of our clubs they're super rounds, but 35 grand, some of these up to a capacity of. Northern Territory, that's open at the moment. It's a quick response grant, not heavily administered in terms of administration requirements. WA Active Regional Community Grants, that's open year round. So they're all little rats and mice grants that, obviously this is not capital grants. Capital grants, and for those that are looking at upgrading their facilities, those projects normally take 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So that needs a master plan, it needs a strategic plan. What we're trying to do here is just identify little grants that come up here and there, and we'll continue to refresh that. I mentioned at the start, we've got a lot of clubs who really need help, and we are now changed our approach to this. We are now saying to clubs, look, probably our strength of our organisation has probably been our DNA for 10 years is doing workshops, and that's step 4. And I'm going to walk through this, but this is a lot of our clubs know they want to make change, but they don't really know what change looks like. So obviously hopefully the webinars will give you a bit of a taste on just thinking a little bit differently. Number 2, which in the last poll that I'm going to bring up in about 5 minutes time, if you haven't done a health check, it's a 10 to 15 minute exercise. It's the best exercise time that you'll spend. And the third part is maybe if you want to chat with us, great, fantastic. Step 4 is that for workshops, but what we're saying to clubs, we will do the workshop, but we're going to try and find a grant to fund the workshop for you. So if you don't get a grant, you don't need to fund it. So we're going to try and we write the grant with you, alongside you, to hopefully secure the funds to do the workshop. So this is the health check that's here. And again, it's everything, just to be clear, everything that CLUBMAP does do, and particularly for the first timers, we're off field, off pitch, off court, off water, off whatever. This health check is a really short, sharp, succinct exercise of assessing the 11 key operational areas of your club: planning, structure, governance, sponsorship, fundraising, grants, volunteers, membership, online presence, capital infrastructure. It's a simple exercise, 10 to 15 minutes. And the good thing about this report, it generates a little action plan at the end. The second point, which I think there's nothing like this in the, and I'm not trying to be smart here, but there's nothing like this in the world. We've built a resources hub. My background's 20 years of professional sport. Pretty much got a lifelong experience of community sport. How do we teach people? A lot of our volunteers are put into roles. They're not taught how to run the club. Congratulations, you're now in charge of sponsorship. I've never done sponsorship. Congratulations, you're now in charge of grants. I've never done grants. So this is all the topics. So we've got 120 videos. We just added a new module, capital infrastructure and facilities. But it's all about the how. We've got 250 templates. There's 40 or 50 position descriptions. There's little short 90-second to 2-minute videos on how to run your organisation, how to be better at sponsorship and grants and fundraising and volunteers. This is 30 years of IP. We spent a year putting it into an AI. The actual content is AI based. So, and for those that we've got over 3,000 people using our platform. So this is how affordable it is. And this is $49 for a 12-month access. Anyone who wants to even just check it out, if you go to see the link down the bottom of the slide, hub.clubmap.com.au, buy for individuals. When we buy them a club, it's a lot more. But if you just want one license for you specifically, so you can learn, because tonight is all as much. This is about learning. We're cramming a lot into 40 minutes tonight, 40 to 45 minutes. But there's probably 20 or 30 hours of education there. There's about 12 webinars on demand. You can watch different topics on the Sports Foundation, gifting, bequesting, capital infrastructure, sponsorship, all those topics. So if anyone's interested, it's $49 inclusive of everything. For us, we've got now 3,000 people using it. There's nothing like it in the world. And it's probably our pride and joy, but it really is a very high level. And it's the great thing about this model, it's very user friendly and it's simplified for the average person around the country. This is probably and again, I mentioned this a little bit briefly. A lot of our clubs need help. They don't know where to go for help. So these workshops we do probably 250 workshops a year. This is 2 workshops where we build an operational plan, a strategic focus, and a revenue plan. And what we say to clubs is, okay, and I'm going to show a little video that goes for about 1.5 minutes in a second. This is just feel the energy this creates, because clubs often get flat and burnt out and, they just don't know where to go. So again, at a conservative level, even our 3rd and 4th tier sports are generating another 30 grand of new revenue. I don't say that lightly. That is a conservative number. Some are generating a lot more than that because they're using new age ways of raising money. Some of our clubs aren't making 1 cent from digital revenue. It's crazy. And I forgot to mention that those workshops that were here, we provide 12-month support. So we just don't come in, deliver a couple of workshops, 2-hour long workshops. You get to ring us anytime during the 12 months. But what we're offering in the next couple of minutes, if you're interested, we're going to try and find a grant and write the grant for you, so you're not out of pocket 1 cent. It's pretty compelling, I think, for a lot of our clubs to get involved. So again, the grants team I just talked about, no costs. We will work with you. We'll hold your hand. You'll provide some information if there is a grant. Sometimes the timing of the grants can be out of whack, but nevertheless, we usually have had a pretty good strike rate with that. I'm just going to briefly touch on if we've got any Bendigo banks or councils or state bodies or national bodies in here tonight. We're running a very successful club development program because they want to help their clubs, right? If you see the link on the bottom right-hand corner, so if you're a league or an association or a community bank or a council, if you go to the link clubmap.com.au/community, that is support for our leagues and associations and those SSOs, NSOs that I just talked about, because they need help as well. We work with NSOs, and we did a review of 59 SSOs in the last 12 to 18 months, and they are really feeling the pain as well. So that's the bigger ticket there. We've got what I'm going to do now before we kick into gear I'm going to bring up bear with me. I'm trying to do too many things at the one time. Okay. So I hope everyone can and again, has that come up? So the first question is, would you like CLUBMAP and to try and find a grant to fund planning workshop for your club? Number one. Would you like a chat with CLUBMAP about how we can help your club? No obligation, yes or no? And if you would like, and I really strongly encourage you, if you haven't done this, would you like a free CLUBMAP health check that you can complete? Whether you do that as an individual, you can do it confidentially, or you can do it around a table with with the committee. So that's I'll just let that run in the background. But again, a lot of our clubs need that support. So Mark, do you want to touch on our next webinar, our next couple of webinars? And I've got a few questions, and then I think there's a few in the chat that we can answer as well.
Sure. Yeah, look, I just wanted to say, TD, that the correct answer to all three questions there is yes, please. Okay. That's me being a bit smart. Look, this is, the first webinar in the series. It's really concentrating on structure, but we've got more to follow. In a couple of weeks, it's how to find and keep sponsors. This is a huge missed opportunity for so many clubs, and it's so simple once you've got your structure in place. TD's already hinted at the way you can put the structure in place to help with your volunteer take up. And that webinar's in 2 Mondays' time, so February 24. And then after that, the big one for just about everyone in Clubland, how to attract more volunteers. We'll see you for that one on Monday, the 10th of March. For those in South Australia, ACT and Victoria, will be the perfect way to round out the wonderful Labor Day weekend.